All right, today we got something a little different on the channel. So we are working on a Toyota 4Runner instead of a Tacoma. Anybody who knows me knows that I like to help out people working on their rigs. We're gonna do the lift today. So this is the Westcott Designs lift. It is a pre-collar lift. It is not like the spacer lift that I've talked about previously. This one actually goes, it keeps your factory geometry while still allowing the lift. So these are the rear. You actually unbolt the rear springs. This goes up where the bump stop is. The bump stop then bolts to this, and then the spring goes back in, so it adds an 1.5 inch space in the rear. These are the front pre-collar. You can see they are billet machined, and they go in place of the factory spot on the lower spring perch for the strut. I'll show when that gets to that point. And then these are the top spacers to realign the top of the spring. There in the kit, there are these little 1/4 inch spacers that you're like, where the heck do these washers go? These are for the front bump stops to add a 1/4 inch to them since you're lengthening the travel. This particular kit goes 3 inches in the front, 1.5 inches in the rear. So we'll get the truck in the air, get some jack stands under it, get the wheels off, talk to you from there. All right, we got it up in the air, tire off. So now there's 3 bolts up here you got to pull off. There's one on the bottom you got to pull off. That takes the whole coilover assembly out. From there, just in order to get it out, we'll probably have to undo the sway bar end link here on both sides to give it free play to drop away. And then sometimes you got to undo the upper control arm if there's enough room. We'll probably end up undoing that this time, just because when we go to put it back together, it's going to be longer, so it'll be harder to get up in there. Let's go ahead and get all that torn apart real quick. All right, so this next part is somewhat important. You still want to maintain your alignment between the bottom where the bolt goes through, how the spring sits, all the way up through to these top bolts. So we're going to clean off our base here. And basically we're going to make an alignment mark. We'll go right here, even though we're taking this piece off. My paint going here. And then we're going to make another mark right down here on the base of the shaft. That way we know that those two are in line. And then, just for personal reference, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it up to the top here. And I'm just going to say right around in here for the top part, if you can see that. So we've got the top up here, and then the base down here. Now, we'll throw a spring compressor on the spring, compress it, and undo that top nut. What I usually try to recommend, if you're not using air tools, is break loose this top one first. Just break it loose while the spring's under full tension. It'll be a lot easier. Once it's got the spring tension off of it, it'll want to spin a lot easier. So break it loose with the spring tension on it, then you can go on and tension the spring, take the top nut the rest of the way off. Do not take that top nut off without a spring compressor unless you're looking for a trip to the hospital, because it will hurt you very bad. So I put my spring compressors on. Something to take note, on this particular one with these 4Runners, this piece actually won't just hook over the spring like you would normally think. The gap in here is too tight. So I actually had to start it down here, spin it a half one, take the other one, stick it on, and then spin them both together all the way up to the height that I wanted them to be at before finally connecting the bottoms. So keep that in mind. You always want to make sure that however you're taking it apart is however it's going back together. So as you take things apart, keep them in order. You got your top nut, your washer, your top hat. There's a rubber insulator up there. Bottom washer. Slide your whole strut assembly out. Set your spring to the side. Do not mess with your compressors there. One of the videos that I watched, they said you can actually take a torch and heat this and it'll get it just soft enough to pop that off there. So I'm going to go ahead and try that now. I'll show you how well that works. apparently that works pretty good. And then the last step, set your strut upside down, take the spring perch, take a rubber mallet or a dead blow. You don't want to hit this with just a regular metal hammer. The shock can mess up the internals, but just a dead blow hammer, give it a couple of spins, and it'll pop right off there. So you'll take your new one, drop it down over. Don't forget about your alignment marks. There's our alignment mark there. Remember, it was sitting right with the spring perch. Set it down the other way, and now you're going to take your dead blow and come around the other way. Now this one, you want to work a little bit shorter strokes to make sure that it's getting set on there evenly, because this is going to be machined to a tighter tolerance than the factory pop metal piece is. Every once in a while, check and make sure your alignment marks are still good. Alright, it seems to be started on there pretty well. I'm actually going to utilize the spring tension to let it finish seating, and then basically put it back together the same way it came apart. So once that piece is on, don't forget your dust collector here, or dust protector, excuse me. Snap that on there. Now, since you did raise that collar, when you go to put your spring back on, there's going to be a good chance that you're going to have to compress this spring a lot more to get the rest of the assembly together. So remember how it came apart. Your top washer there, top hat here. Don't forget, we put another alignment mark on that top hat. Find that alignment mark. Up top here. Sometimes this is a little bit of a pain getting everything lined up, but so see, we're aligned, but I don't think we can get those threads started. So I'm going to put a little more tension on this spring here. Hopefully we can get a piece started. And then you're going to run this side down until it's tight and it starts trying to spin the center shaft, and then we'll finish torquing that once we get it back in the vehicle. Or not, maybe it was seated. Alright, so I don't know if you can see it in the video, but the spring is tighter on this side than it is on this side. I'm guessing that this collar is lopsided just a little bit and it's holding more tension. Once we put the vehicle weight back down on this and it goes over a bump or two, it'll slam back down in there. Don't worry, we'll tighten everything else up. It'll be just fine. Very important, when you get to this point on reassembly, do not forget your top spacer. You cannot get it in afterwards. So you're gonna have to kind of finagle everything and move it around to get room to get it up over that top piece. If you think you can keep it all together while you're putting it up in there, you can put it up in beforehand. This one had to kind of move around a lot, so I didn't think I would get it. Once you get to that point, get your top nuts started. That way it'll hold it in there as you're messing with the bottom. I actually think that they provide new hardware for these, so I'm going to check on that real quick. And then we'll get the bottom reassembled. Once you get everything reassembled, you're going to be tempted to put your ball joint and everything back together on this side. Don't, because you still need the room for that sway bar to move on the other side. What you need to do on this side though is you need to get your bump stop. These just screw in. I think the instructions say to use, you know, a big pair of channel locks or something like that. If you've got a big pipe wrench, it works so much better. Just hook it on, get it set up, and that way if you need a little extra, you can always put a piece of pipe on it. But being these are fairly new vehicles, hopefully it won't be too bad. Once you get it broke loose, it should basically spin right out of there. So this is pretty simple. Spin it out, throw your spacer on, like so. I'm going to throw a little blue Loctite on there for good measure. Also, the top bolts we were talking about previously on top of the strut, they are included with new hardware. Definitely use those. And it says to red Loctite. I don't have any red Loctite, so I'm using blue Loctite. Once you get your Loctite and your spacer back on there, spin it back in there and tighten it back up. Alright, on to the other side. I won't bore you with that one. Alright, finished up the front end here, so this is what it should look like when you are finished. You have the mini collar up above, and you have the aftermarket pre-collar down below with the 1/4 inch spacer on your bump stop. Make sure everything is torqued, put back together. Do any inspections at this time for worn parts. I already notified her about upper ball joints need to be replaced. We're going to check into that depending on how the alignment goes, whether or not we need to replace upper control arms for caster. The only parts that you should have left when you finish, you should have 2 of these factory collars, and you should have 6 of these factory top nuts for the top of the strut. You should have no extra parts. If you have extra parts, go back and figure out what you missed. So put the front tires on and move to the rear. Got the front end done yesterday. It ended up getting dark, and I don't like filming in the dark, so she came and got her truck and came back this morning to get it finished up. So these are pretty easy. Definitely just unbolt the factory bump stops that are up inside of the coil spring in the rear. This then goes in place of it, and then that factory bump stop bolts to it, and that gives you that 1.5 inches in the rear. So comes with new hardware. There are lock washers and everything on here, grade 8 hardware, but we're gonna Loctite it anyways. So let's get in the air, get the tires off. All right, so the rear tires are off. Quick correction here, let me show you. This is a factory bump stop. This up here is like a spring insulator, but it's also kind of a bump stop because it sits here on the axle. So just to clarify, we're not putting the spacers here, they're going up there inside of the spring. So in order to get to that, what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the rear sway bar right here, just undo this little nut up top here, and then we're going to undo the bottom of the shock down here on both sides. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow that axle to float side to side. We'll put a jack stand under the other side and start letting the jack down, and it'll let that axle tilt. And so as that axle tilts, it's going to relieve the spring pressure. Get in there, pop the spring out, change everything out, put that one back in, put the jack back under it, move the jack stand to the other side, let the other side tilt. In order to do this safely, you also need to put jack stands underneath the frame of the vehicle to where only the axle is moving, not the frame of the vehicle. So be safe, think it through. So I'll show you what that looks like here in a few. All right, so my jack stand method didn't work. I ended up having to put a jack under each side and let them both down all the way. Apparently the 4Runners have a lot more suspension travel in the rear than I thought. So got the one side out. You can see spring sitting here, isolator sitting here. So we're gonna take that other piece and bolt it to the top of this, and then we'll start reassembly. Here is one other piece that I forgot to mention to disconnect. I don't know that you actually need to, now that I'm looking at it, but the parking brake or e-brake cable looked like it might have gotten bound up, so I went ahead and disconnected it. But other than that, this is what it looks like at full droop, and you can see it's just got some free play in it here. And yeah, get these bolted in, get it put back together. All right, when you go to bolt these together, you drop the bolt down in, and then it goes flat washer, lock washer, nut, and that's a 14 millimeter. I put some Loctite on this just where it wouldn't rattle loose. And then since you can't get a socket down on top of that nut, I just crammed you're gonna need a pretty wide blade screwdriver. And then I just crammed it down in there and basically got it on the edge of the bolt and kind of wedged it against the side of the rubber, and then tightened it as best I could out here. So this side's done, ready to go back together. You can see how they just bolt together there, that little spacer. And I'll go back up in there, spring will go back in it, everything will be held together. All right, new springs are in. You can see they're in there. This is what it looks like up in here, if you can even see. Probably can't even see the isolator up in there. But passenger side was great. Just a little bit of downward pressure went right in. Driver's side had to remove the track bar in order to get enough downward force to get in there, slipped right in. I got everything put back together, torqued down. Noticed that her rear brake pads were a little worn, so went ahead and got some of those, air filter and cabin filter at the same time, just get it all done. So ready to throw the wheels back on. And last thing is going to be to torque your wheels. Don't forget to torque your wheels once you get everything set down. And then after 500 miles, you need to go through and re-torque any suspension pieces that you took off. That's mostly for the front end. The rear end doesn't really have a lot, but it's a good idea to check it anyways. So I'll get it all set down, get the wheels on it, get everything torqued up, and then check measurements. All right. So when we started, I took measurements from the ground to the edge of the fender well here on stock height. In the front it was 34.5 inches, and now we are at 37 3/8, just shy of 3 inches. So I'm sure they'll settle in a little bit. And the back for the rear, it was 37 3/8 inches, and now we are at 38.5, so just shy of 1.5 inches, which is basically what they claim. All in all, pretty simple install, not too bad. But I mean, now we got this big wheel gap, and these silver tires or silver rims don't look very good. She's still got bald tires, so let's see if we can fix that real quick. Obviously, we haven't got new tires put on. So these tires are the ones she went with. They are 285 70/17 and a set of takeoff wheels that she was able to pick up from another friend. So now we know that these tires are taller than the factory. Let's grab a tape measure and see what our overall gains on clearance are. So stock, we had 34 and basically a half on the front end. From the ground to the top, we are now at 38, so 3.5 inches. In the rear, we were at 37 3/8, and we are now at 39. So it's 1 5/8 in the front, or 1 5/8 in the rear, and 3.5 inches in the front. So not a bad overall gain. And she did also get a full-size spare, so that definitely helps. Already got the alignment and everything taken care of. So she is now ready to go out and hit the trails with some of you guys. So I hope this helped. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. This was an extremely easy kit to install. I would say even with a moderate knowledge of suspension and steering, you can definitely install this yourself. Not complicated at all. So like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you guys like the 4Runner content, got plenty of friends with 4Runners. I can definitely help out more of them and get you guys some different 4Runner content. So thanks for watching. Have a good day.